Hello Southwest MLS members. In this video I'm going to go through some of the recent changes that have happened recently with Southwest MLS, cover some more changes that are happening in the fourth quarter, and then wrap up with a sneak peek of some stuff coming in 2022. All of the changes covered in this video are things that your Southwest MLS committee and board of directors have worked on, voted for, and approved. Changes like these may seem easy, but each of the decisions come with a lot of considerations from many different angles. Does it match industry standards? Is there anything that we need to do with historical data? Does this option open opportunity for abuse? Is this something the MLS should be doing, or is it a responsibility of the broker? How does this decision affect big brokers, small brokers, property managers, investors, appraisers, data vendors, data consumers, home buyers, home sellers, and anyone else in the real estate industry? Your committees work through all of this and more. Many of these items involve months of work, and your volunteer leaders work very hard to make sure Southwest MLS is a renowned leader within the MLS industry. So next time you see one of our amazing volunteers, thank them. Or, even better, become one. Sign-ups for 2022 committees are open now. Check your emails and the blog on gar.com for more information. I'm going to cover all of these in more detail in a bit, but here's just a quick overview of the items that we're going to cover that happened already or is on the roadmap in the near future. I apologize in advance for having slides with a lot of words on them. I normally hate that, but when we're discussing rule changes, it's important to have the full verbiage of the rule or policy on screen, so it's more than just whatever Richard says. And then here's also a quick glance at some of the upcoming changes that are a work in progress. Again, we're going to go into more detail, but let's just dive into it. So let's start with the items that have already changed earlier this year. When I first arrived at Southwest MLS, there was one policy I focused on pretty early, and that was the listing change policy. Previously, if you needed staff to make a change for you on a listing, you had to actually send in the paperwork or contract addendum that proved you had permission from the seller to make that change. Needless to say, this caused a lot of angst for members and a poor customer service experience, not to mention additional work for staff, which slowed our response time. So the new policy enacted by your board of directors this year is that the only thing we require from members now is a simple email stating that you asked us to make the change. For example, please change the listing price on MLS number 912345 to $350,000. You are still required to complete all of the proper paperwork on your end in order to comply with the Real Estate Commission rules, but the responsibility of making sure that is completed is on your qualifying broker instead of the MLS. Staff does still reserve the right to request the documentation at our discretion. Here's also a quick list of some smaller changes that have happened this year, adding items that members have asked for, removing items that are causing an issue, or just doing things that make sense. For example, none used to be an option under exterior materials. It's not possible for a building to not have an exterior material, but if a property had something that wasn't on the list, members had no choice but to choose that, so we changed it to other. While a few of the items like this start with the committee, nearly all of these changes come from members. So even if you aren't on a committee, if you see something that doesn't make sense or have ideas that need to change or should be added, give me a call. We'll have a conversation where I can add some MLS perspective and you can give me some broker perspective. I make notes of your reasoning and it is presented to the policy committee. If there's some reason that an idea can't or won't happen, or if it's been discussed before, I can explain why. Every actionable idea, even if it comes from only one person, goes on our list to be reviewed with the committees. Next, let's cover a few things that went into effect on September 1st. First, the fines for clear cooperation have drastically increased. The first violation is $500, the second violation is $1,000, and the third violation is $5,000 and a loss of MLS privileges for 30 days. It's important to note that this graduation does not reset. As we learned in my Clear Cooperation video, Clear Cooperation is pro-competitive and pro-consumer. These fine amounts drive home the severity of needing to comply with that rule. Also, the definition of active was changed, so that if a listing is active, it must be available for showings. It is no longer allowable to have do not show or temporarily off-market conditions while in active status. If you want to put a property on the MLS on a Wednesday, but are not going to start showings until after an open house on Saturday, you should have the listing incoming soon, no showing status until Saturday. Otherwise, you will be forced to move the listing to withdrawn. One other relatively minor change is that all SWMLS staff emails have changed as we work to brand Southwest MLS. In all cases, the email stayed the same except for the domain was changed from gar.com to SWMLS.com. The one exception to this is that MLS@gar.com was changed to support@SWMLS.com. For now, emails sent to the old @gar.com addresses will still forward to the new emails, but this will not be true forever. So update your address books now. Also, make sure to keep an eye on SWMLS.com as we build out the site with more information and training for you. Right now, the products and support pages have all already been updated with the contact information for all of our vendor products, including some that have after hours and weekend support, such as Showing Time and Instanet. If you're having trouble with one of these products, you can check there first for FAQs and contact information and hours of operation. Next, let's cover a few items that will become effective on November 1st. So this is the big one. Starting November 1st, we are changing the relist policy. Previously, you could cancel and relist a listing in the MLS by only entering the word relist at the beginning of your LOSL remarks. The issue with this is that there are lead gen systems that people use that we do not send the LOSO remarks to because it is a private field. When a listing is moved to canceled, it is telling everyone in the MLS and everyone that uses the MLS data that you have terminated your listing agreement with the seller and that they are free to contact the seller to prospect that listing. Each time this happens, members were supposed to be creating a new listing agreement with their seller, but that was not happening, and people were canceling and relisting often to either reset days on market or to put their listing back on the hot sheet. In both cases, this is deceiving the public because it was not, in fact, a new listing. The new rule requires that if you do relist a property within 30 days, you must provide this to SWMLS staff with the new listing agreement to prove that you do, in fact, have a new listing agreement. The intent of this built-in process is not to allow members to continue to manipulate days on market and the hot sheet, but rather to allow brokerages the freedom to save a seller. For example, the seller fires their listing broker on the 1st, but on the 8th, the qualifying broker is able to convince the seller to list with someone else in the office, so they sign a new listing agreement. This allows the office to retain the listing and get it back on market without having to wait 30 days to relist it. In general, if you still have an active listing agreement on a property, it should never be moved to canceled or expired. If there is something wrong with the property that requires you to take it off the market, you should use withdrawn. While in the withdrawn status, days on market does not continue to count. It's like hitting the pause button on a movie. When the listing goes back on the market, it picks up right where it left off. Check out this example. In this case, the property was on the market for 4 days, got an offer, went into pending for 25 days, had an issue, took 3 months to fix that issue, then went back on the market, and its days on market would still be at 4 days. One caveat to this: if you're moving a listing from pending back to active and you do not enter the fall through date, the DOM will not subtract automatically. If this happens, just contact us as SWMLS staff and we can fix that for you. Here's another new one trying to address an issue that plagues our industry. There will now be a $250 immediate fine for unauthorized use of photos. If a photographer or listing broker reports to us that another broker is using their photos without permission, there will be a $250 fine assessed to the offending broker per listing that they do this on. There's 3 easy questions to ask yourself to avoid this fine. Did I capture the picture myself? Have I paid the copyright holder to use this photo? Do I have written permission from the copyright holder to use this photo? If the answer to all 3 of these questions is no, do not use the photo. This is true regardless of the source, whether that is Google, someone else's listing, or even the seller themselves. Remember, just because someone paid for photos does not mean they own the copyright to those photos. Most photographers retain the copyright to the photos that they take. So even if you obtain permission from the old listing broker or even the seller to use the photos, if the photographer had an agreement with that listing broker that only licensed them to use the photos for that one listing, they could still report you for an unauthorized usage. Make sure you're talking to the copyright holder, which in general is the person who took the picture. Remember, you are ultimately liable for the fine if the copyright holder reports that you are using the photos. If this happens, contact Southwest MLS staff for options to dispute the fine with the compliance committee, and we'll handle those on a case-by-case basis. And this is just a few minor changes to MLS areas. I include these here to show you the minutia that committees and board work on for you every time they meet, and as a reminder to report these kind of inconsistencies to us, regardless of how small they are. In each of these cases, there was a small subdivision or grouping of homes that made sense in one area, but was being cut off or included in another area. And things change as new subdivisions are built or are added on. Our areas have to change a little bit in order to fit that. Now, let's cover one of the other changes that is coming soon. This is likely in the fourth quarter of this year. I do have a disclaimer that this project does require quite a bit of programming work, so it may be pushed into early 2022. But it's something I'm pretty excited about, which is changes to zoning in the MLS. This section is a total pain, right? There's a ton of options. You have no clue if they apply to your listing or not. There are a ton of compliance issues as well. For example, if a property has an Albuquerque address, but it's in the unincorporated area and thus Bernalillo County zoning applies, you still get compliance notices because you didn't pick one of the IDO options. So this entire setup is equally painful for staff. So here's the change. Zoning will instead be moved to the Main Fields tab instead of the Details tab. In the Main Fields tab, we can limit the drop-down menu to only options that are available to you based on the city that was chosen. We have painstakingly gone through and made sure that every option is available. For example, a property with an Albuquerque city address has to have options available for the city IDO zoning, Bernalillo County, Paradise Hill special zoning, and even some Sandoval County. Or a property with a Moriarty city address must have both Santa Fe and Torrance County options. In both cases, Data Checker has been set up to look at the city and county that you choose and make sure that you've picked an available option in the right area. In addition to that, we've also found links to every zoning code lookup and the definitions for each of these zones and are including them in the little help bubble next to the zoning code. Clicking on any of these links will open the site in a new window so you can search for your zoning code and then easily return to your listing to pick the right one. Next up are some other changes that will be coming sometime in the first half of 2022, depending on how development goes. At Southwest MLS, we pride ourselves in working on the cutting edge of technology. And the first change we're going to talk about is something we are the first in the industry to launch, and we're using artificial intelligence to make it happen. Before we get into the nerdy stuff, let's talk about the rule itself. Simply put, every listing will be required to have, at minimum, a photo of the living room, kitchen, bathrooms, exterior front, and the backyard. Note that there should be at least one photo of each bathroom. So if it's a one bathroom home, there'll be 5 required photos. If it's a 2 bathroom home, there are 6 required photos, so on and so forth. Now, this rule does apply to all statuses, including sold. So under this rule, you cannot remove all of your photos after a listing is sold. I'll address seller privacy in a moment, I promise. It does currently only apply to the residential property type and only when the build description is resale. So it does not apply to new or under construction homes because, frankly, they don't have those photos to take. Also, there are exceptions in place if the property is either tenant occupied or is unsafe and is thus difficult or impossible to obtain photos. As I said before, we are industry first with a rule like this, so do expect minor tweaks to the rule over time as we see how it ends up working in the real world after it's launched. Now, this is not a reactive only rule. Our compliance system will be proactively checking every listing in the MLS by using artificial intelligence from a company called RestB.ai. This is a computer vision software that can look at a photo and can tell Data Checker what it is a photo of. Here are 4 examples showing front of house, kitchen, living room, and bathroom. No other MLS in the country is utilizing AE technology in this manner. Your Southwest MLS Board of Directors, Committee, and staff are leading this charge. Okay, I promised to talk about seller privacy. One of the reasons for this rule's creation was to prevent members from deleting all their photos off of a listing when it moves into sold. The problem with this practice is that it makes the listing completely useless for the creation of CMAs, BPOs, or appraisals by our members. If 2 homes are next door to each other and one sells for $50,000 more, but you can't see any of the photos, how are you supposed to tell what caused the difference? Southwest MLS members need to be able to see upgrades, finishes, fixtures, and features that can only be seen in photos. The 5 items chosen for the minimum by the policy committee and the board of directors we're based on the photos that would be most likely to show these items, while also keeping the number of photos to a minimum so that you can't see the entire layout of the home. In fact, only 3 of the requirements are of the interior of the home at all. Additionally, based on our IDX rules and agreements, the majority of websites already automatically take down photos once a home is sold. This is my home, purchased in April this year, pulled up on Zillow, HomeSnap, Homes.com, and Trulia. The listing agent did not remove any photos from the listing, and neither her nor I did anything to contact any of these companies and ask them to take the photos down. As you can see, the only available photo in every case is the Google Street View. The one exception to this is Realtor.com, and either the listing agent or the consumer can contact them directly to have the photos removed. Another option is to utilize the Mark Private While Off Market feature in Flex. You can enact this feature at any time, even while the home is active. And once the property moves to any off-market status, it will automatically remove the photos from the data feed and prompt any website using the photos to take them down, including Realtor.com. This keeps the photos available for members within the MLS. It may also be a good idea to remind your seller that everyone who has access to the MLS data is licensed in the state of New Mexico, which includes background checks and fingerprinting. Finally, remind your sellers that on their listing agreement, they authorize that you as the broker are required to adhere to all MLS rules and regulations, so you may not remove the required photos. As previously mentioned, only 3 of the requirements will be of the interior of the home as we try to balance respecting privacy with keeping useful data in the MLS. Next, let's talk about fair housing. At the beginning of 2021, NAR passed a best practice that MLSs must address fair houses in a proactive manner. To that end, Southwest MLS is adding this section to our rules, making it clear that we are committed to compliance with all fair housing laws and requiring members to describe the property, not the people. We will be implementing proactive enforcement of this through Data Checker as well. To aid in enforcement, there is a word list, and words in that list will automatically be flagged by Data Checker. This list will, of course, be made available to everyone as we get closer to launch. Now, despite popular belief, there is no published naughty word list by HUD that will get you in immediate trouble if you use a word on that list. The entire issue of discriminatory language is very nuanced and is more focused on the intent than the use of the actual word. To reflect that, some words, such as the examples you see here, will only be flagged if they are followed or preceded by words like people, community, or many of their synonyms. Remember, the rule is that you're describing the property, not the people. The rule does not say, thou shalt not use these words. Saying something like Asian design is okay, but Asian community is not. If your listing contains a word on the list, this is an example of the email that you will receive. Note that these emails are a courtesy notice, and there is no fine associated with the fair housing rule at this time. This email is simply a reminder to brokers to look at their remarks and again, make sure they're describing the property, not the people. I'll add this. During my research into how often words were used that could be potential fair housing violations, there was a very clear decrease in the use of language starting in the late 90s until recently. Though I obviously didn't read every remark on every listing, my random sampling did not find any examples that would have been obvious violations in the last few years, which is why this policy is being created as a light touch. This could change as we collect data once the proactive checking is fully launched, but our primary goal is to promote fair housing for all through education and awareness. Next up is a big one that is requested often. We will be requiring that all residential and residential income properties have the estimated tax levy disclosure uploaded to documents in the listing. There are 3 key parts of the rule we're going to break down, as outlined by New Mexico Statute 4713-4, which provides broker requirements providing the tax levy disclosure for all potential buyers. First is that the tax levy disclosure should be procured by the seller's broker and provided prior to accepting an offer to purchase. The most efficient way to distribute this is via the MLS, as the seller's broker uploads the file in one place and it is immediately available to the brokers of any potential buyers. Also note that the law specifically states it should be requested from the county assessor. Let's look at why. Side by side here, we have the tax levy disclosure pulled from the treasurer's website on the left and the assessor's website on the right. Can you spot the difference? The major difference is that the assessor's website includes the prior year tax. which, according to the statute, must be included. So take note, if you have been using the Treasurer's website before, you are not in compliance with the state statute. Finally, the statute specifies that the estimate must be based on the listed price of the property. This means that if you change the list price, you must update the tax levy disclosure as well. Finally, we'll be again using Data Checker to proactively check all listings for existence of this document. So make sure you choose tax levy disclosure from the drop-down when you're uploading the file. And if you do come across any listings where the disclosure is either from the Treasurer's website or does not have the current list price on it, please utilize that report button in the MLS to let us know. One final change that has already been approved but will take a little while to put together is the creation of the Other Structures Detail Lookup. Detail lookups are the page with all the little checkboxes on them. Right now, various structures are spread across a few different lookups on our detail page, and we're moving them all to this one lookup to make it easier to locate and utilize. There's also going to be a couple extras that aren't currently available right now. This is also the first step of many more to come to bring our details page more in line with industry standards, so look for more changes like this to come in the future. To close, I just want to give one more plug for our committees. This is your association and your MLS, and nothing that we do as staff happens without your participation. There's a blog on the GAR.com homepage with a link to descriptions of the different committees and a link to submit your interest form. Complete this by November 12th and get involved. At Southwest MLS, we have the Policy Committee, the Tech Committee, and the Compliance Committee. Thanks for watching. Help us spread the word on these changes, and please reach out if you have any questions or need additional details. Have a great day.